Hey, what's going on guys? This is AndrewChicken and welcome back to another video. Today, we're going to do another meta tier list for the Midnight Masquerade update, because I haven't done one since the Emergence update, and a whole lot has changed. We've gotten crossplay ranked, and we've also gotten some very spicy balance changes that have shifted some characters up and down in the meta. Now before we get started, of course, I do want to give off a few disclaimers. First and foremost, this is just my opinion, alright? This is an opinion piece. If you disagree, that is absolutely okay, and I would love to hear your thoughts down in the comments. That being said, this is coming from the perspective of a Season 6 Grandmaster. I was top 50 Grandmaster last split, and I've played a bunch of crossplay ranked this split as well, and so I think I have a pretty good idea of what I'm talking about. I'm also a keyboard and mouse player with almost no experience on controller, but of course crossplay is a thing in ranked this split, and so I have played against a bunch of controller players, and I like to think I'm at least a little bit experienced now with what the controller meta is about, and so I'm going to try to rank champions who are traditionally good on the controller meta like Talus in their respective places on the tier list, instead of ranking them from a purely keyboard and mouse perspective. But that being said, if you do see something wrong with my controller placements, like if Vivian is in a wrong place or something, please again just let me know in the comments. Now before I tell you how the tiers work, I want to remind you that I've started a brand new VODs channel where you can find all of my Twitch VODs, but over on YouTube instead. So if you find that I stream at a bad time for you, or you just don't like Twitch, or you want to catch up on some of the content you may have missed, this is the place for you. Now we're trying to get it to 1,000 subscribers, and we're almost there, but we just need a little bit more help. So head on over and subscribe. I would love it if we could get to 1,000 subscribers before June the 4th, so that way I can say I got 1,000 subscribers in a month. That would be amazing. But yeah, with that being said, let's get back to the video. Next up, I want to explain how I'm doing each of the different tiers on this tier list and how I'm ranking each of the champions, and this is very important. I want you to listen to this before you go down below and comment how I put a character in the wrong tier or something like that. So first of all, at the very bottom of the tier list, we have the D tier, which is the underperforming tier. This is the tier for characters who are generally just not that great right now and definitely need some tune-ups. The difference between this tier list and the last tier list is I've actually gotten rid of the tier below this one, which was called the E tier, because I think a tier with almost no characters in it is just kind of silly, so I got rid of it. Next up we have the C tier. Now this is the tier for characters that are still pretty good, but only in certain situations. So they're not always good all the time. You've either got to build a specific comp around them, or they're only good on certain maps, or they're only good against certain team comps. So it doesn't mean that they're bad, it just means that you can't play them all the time. Want to make that very clear. Next up we have the B tier, which is the tier for the characters that are purely average. They're pretty good. You can play them, but they definitely get outclassed by other champions in the later tiers. After that we have the A- tier, which is the tier for characters that are actually really strong, but you also have to be really, really good at the character to really get all of that strength out of them. I actually moved this from last tier list. I did have this tier in the last tier list, but it was actually the B- tier, and I thought that was a little bit confusing in terms of interpreting their power level, so I decided to move that tier up to A- to better demonstrate that, yeah, these characters are really good. You've just got to be good at them. After that we have the A+ tier, which is the tier for characters that are genuinely just really strong right now, and are a solid choice for you to pick up, but they're not so busted that they need any immediate nerfs. Speaking of champions that need immediate nerfs, the last tier is the top tier, the S tier. This is for the champions that are the best in the game, and there's not much more to say about this tier. It's just, yeah, these champions are busted. Now one last thing to note is that I'll be ordering the champions in their respective tiers on a class-by-class basis. So I'll be starting with the DPS, then I'll have the supports, then the tanks, and finally the flanks. So just because I have the supports ahead of the flanks, for example, doesn't mean that I think supports are better than flanks. It's just how I've decided to order the champions, and so I want to clear up any confusion there. But yeah, with all those hefty disclaimers and explanations out of the way, let's go ahead and jump straight into the video. Alright, now let's start off with the D tier. This is the tier for characters who I think are generally underperforming and could definitely use some buffs. First, let's talk about the flanks. We have Skye and Emoji down here in the D tier, and these are both champions who I think are ridiculously easy to counter. Skye definitely got some buffs which really helped her out. She's now one of the fastest characters in the game while invisible, and she has 2 smoke bombs. But Illuminate is still just the hardest counter to this character in the game, and once you buy Illuminate for Skye, it is very easy to deal with her. Even though she's fast, she's still not fast enough to catch up to a lot of the champions in the game, and she also is heavily limited by her range. So once you get Illuminate, she can't really sneak up on you anymore, and she can't really get in her effective range to do that heavy damage that she's known for. So really easy to counter, and if you want to be more supportive with Skye and use Smoke and Dagger, you have to give up your invisibility, which means you're also giving up on that movement speed passive. It's just not a very great deal. As far as Moji is concerned, she's also heavily limited by her range, and she also has the largest hitbox out of any flank, so it's really easy to hit her, and then she's also coupled with actually probably worse mobility than Skye now, considering she can't get the same movement speed and only has her tiny little scamper. She does have some good stuff going for her, like her instant execute ultimate and her magic barrier, but I still think she gets outperformed by basically every flank in the game. Next up, we have the only tank in D tier, which is Terminus. Terminus is, like Skye and Moji, heavily limited by his range. In fact, he has no range. He's a melee character, but he also doesn't really have the damage of a melee character, considering if you get close to Terminus, you're not really punished that hard. His Power Siphon is genuinely really good, but his uptime on it isn't that great, and he generally gets outclassed by a lot of other characters when it comes to defending his team from a lot of damage. In general, he's just not a great tank right now, and every time I see him in Ranked, he just kind of is a pushover. Next up, we have our two D-tier supports, Seris and Corvus. Now, Seris is actually a great support for new players. She is excellent at teaching the class because she's very forgiving and generally just teaches you the basics better than any other champion can. But apart from that, she's not really good at much else. Yeah, she's a pretty decent heal bot, but she still gets outclassed by a lot of the other heal bots in the game, and she doesn't have much else going for her. Her movement ability is pretty good, but it's also easy to track because you can just listen to where she's going or just buy Illuminate. Her damage is really lackluster unless you're committing for a full damage build, but I mean, at that point, you're not really healing, are you? She basically either has to sacrifice her healing or her damage to really do either effectively, and that's because of her long channeled heal, where she basically spends half of her time healing. Other supports who are going to rank higher don't have that same issue and can do both much better, while also having more utility than just a stun every now and then. So Seris, really not that good right now, especially once you get into the higher ranks. I can understand playing her in the mid to low ranks, but once you get higher than that, she's kind of just useless. Corvus is also in the D tier, and that's because, well, he's just inferior to Genos in basically every way right now. He just does not do enough healing. And while yes, he does provide a lot of useful buffs, like movement speed and damage reduction, or just a metric boatload of stuff, the kitchen sink if you go dark gifts, the healing is just not there. You basically need Chronos 3 for his healing to feel good, but by the time you get that, Cauterize is already in full effect, and he just falls off super hard. He's just also really bad at healing tanks. Tanks are basically forced by Rejuvenate, and even with that, it's just not good right now. On top of that, his movement ability is historically very buggy, and you can just have it not teleport at all, which basically just gets you killed. His damage is alright, but he's worse than Genos in every other way right now, and Genos, as you'll see in a little bit, is pretty nuts. Our two damage champions in D are Imani and Kinessa. Now, Kinessa used to be in the good but situational tier, and I've moved her down because I feel like she is just kind of worse than Strix right now, to be totally honest. Her charge up time is too slow, she can't quickscope, her carbine is next to useless, you know, the actual full auto, just Victor version of her rifle. And yeah, her mines are also kind of just like wet farts ever since they got nerfed into the ground due to her talent Oppression, which the talent probably should have been nerfed into the ground and not just the base mine. But I digress. Point is, Kinessa's not really that good right now. She's only good on a few maps, and even still, you're probably better running other champions who are later on in the list. Now, Imani is a champion who you might be scratching your head at because, well, hold on, didn't she just get some massive buffs this patch? Well, kinda, but not really. Her Frost Stance did get a damage buff, which is actually really good, but her cooldown reduction cards got internal cooldowns, meaning that the cooldown spam playstyle is actually worse than it was last patch, even though Affinity got put into base kit and you can now run stuff like the health card at level 5. So it's honestly more of a trade-off than anything. Yeah, the Frost Stance got a net buff, yeah, her cooldowns got lower, but the cooldown spam build is still worse, and it's kind of awkward. Imani is also the buggiest champion in the game. Her dragon is basically an ability that's not even worth using at this point. If you look at the dragon as an enemy, you'll actually see Imani's health bar. It'll basically just reveal where Imani herself is, and you can just then go on over to her body and kill her if you're stealthy enough. On top of that, her dragon now has fall off for some reason, and also you still have a random chance of your Inferno Cannon not working, which her Inferno Cannon is also just kind of a bad ability anyways. Doesn't do enough damage for not applying Cauterize and making you an easy target to hit. Her Frost Bomb is genuinely really good, but is it worth picking Imani just for the Frost Bomb? Probably not. Imani is just a character who I still think needs some tune-ups, but more importantly, she just needs bug fixes. Like, please, this character is so broken. She needs help. Next up is the C tier, which is the tier for characters which are good, but only in the situation where it's appropriate to play them. Let's start off with the only flank in C tier, which is Buck. Buck is basically an all-in champion, where you must dive with him, or he's basically just useless. With Bounce House, he is extremely aggressive, and he is great against comps that are susceptible to dive. But as soon as you get a character like Torvald or Atlas on the enemy team, or God forbid a Shaolin protected by either of those two off-tanks, Buck's job is just so hard. He's basically ineffective. And while you can go and snare or bulk up and try and play a bit more passively, at that point you're just better off picking another character. So he is all in on the dive, and he is exceptional in those dive situations, but otherwise, yeah, don't pick this character. Next up we have Yaggroth, who is in kind of a similar situation. You really have to build an entire comp around Yaggroth, and you have to have a lot of good coordination and communication in order to make this character work. She can play really aggressive and draw a lot of attention from the enemies, but you've got to have good follow-off, and again, it's all about that communication. So she really works in more of a high skill setting, or I guess in gold if the enemies just don't know how to counter her. So yeah, definitely another situational champion. Next up we have our two situational supports, Ray and Grok. Now, Ray is a really weird support because she's not that great by herself, but when she's paired with another support that has a super powerful ult, like Grok, she actually becomes pretty good. Even still though, she's very limited by range, and so on a map like Timbermill, she's just very awkward to play. Ray's healing is just really inconsistent because it relies on her bounces, which are limited by range and also line of sight. And so to make up for those gaps in her healing, she requires another support. But once that other support arrives, she's actually doing pretty good. She provides a little bit of damage, her envelop is pretty good, her ultimate is really good, and then her ultimate charge can power up her other support who hopefully has a really good ult, and then they can ult more and do a bunch of damage, do a bunch of healing, and just win the game. So very, very situational, but in that right situation, she can be pretty valuable. Next up, we have Grok, who's good in a few situations depending on the team comp he's on, and also the team comp he's up against. For his main damage build, which is Maelstrom, he's really good against comps that have a lot of deployables and few shields. So comps that have like a Barrack and a Ying, for example, would get absolutely decimated by Maelstrom Grok, whereas a spread out team with someone like Khan would just not be that great for Grok. As far as healing with Grok, his Totemic Ward playstyle can be really good with a brawly type of comp. You know, a comp that has a lot of tanks and is just kind of focused around being a big death ball. So he's really good for that, but you don't see that all the time, and for comps that are much more mobile or much more spread out, Grok definitely struggles. So another champion who's really good, but only in the right situation. After that, we have our two DPS champions, Strix and Willow. Strix can be good on maps that heavily favor snipers, like Timbermill or Frog Isle, because they have really good sightlines that definitely reward sniping. However, on maps that aren't really that great for sniping, Strix can be more of a liability, and so you just gotta play him on the right map. And even then, there are probably still better options, but he's at least a little bit better than Kinessa right now. After that, we have the B tier. This is for champions who are on the whole pretty solid, but they do get outclassed by characters in the later tiers. Let's start off with our three flanks, Androxus, Vora, and Caspian. All three of these can actually be pretty good if you put in the time and skill to master them, but other flanks just kind of do their job better. Androxus has fallen off ever since his Curse Revolver rework, although the new talent Darkstalker is actually pretty decent now that it's been fixed. On the whole though, he just doesn't do the same damage as he used to, and his damage is actually a little bit on the weaker side compared to some other flanks. Vora is, on the whole, pretty solid. She's kind of just a jack of all trades, but of course being a jack of all trades means you're the master of none, and characters like Seven just directly outclass her. Caspian is the last flank here, and he's taken quite a few hits to his viability, mainly with his big measured cadence nerf a few patches ago. Ever since then, he's kind of just been simmering in a tier where he can still do a great amount of damage and has okay mobility, but definitely gets outclassed by some of the later champions on this list. After that, we have a whole slew of tanks. Fernando, Makoa, Ashe, Nyx, and Rom are all pretty excellent tanks, but they're not at the tip top of the meta right now, and so they just kind of go in this tier. But don't let that position fool you, because they are all still great options, especially when some of the later options are banned. All of them have pretty solid kits in their own right, but the later options just stand out in some way, either through having superior damage, mobility, protective ability, or what have you. So yeah, definitely don't sleep on these guys, but there are better options out there. We only have 2 supports in the B tier, and those are Ying and Io. Both of them can provide pretty solid healing output for the team, and in the case of Io is actually pretty hard to flank as well, due to her having her protective bodyguard that is Luna. However, they don't really offer a lot in the way of much else. Of course, Io does have her stun, but it's even more inconsistent than Ceres's, and Io spends most of her time healing, so she doesn't really do that much damage. Ying can, of course, do some damage when she's not busy healing with her life exchange, but apart from that, she has literally no other supportive capability. Yeah, her illusions can body block some stuff, but she doesn't have any crowd control or any buffs or any debuffs. She's just all or nothing on the healing. And healing, as you know, gets countered by Cauterize, so by late game, Ying isn't feeling too good, but she's still an alright option. Last up here we have a bunch of DPS, and like with the tanks, these are all DPS that have pretty solid kits, but they just get outshined in one way or another by the champions later on. Now, you might be surprised to see Vivian so high, even ranking above Sati and Leon, but you have to keep in mind that on controller, she's actually a lot better than she is on keyboard and mouse, and there are 2 reasons for this. The first reason is that, like basically all fast-firing hit-scan weapons, she is very, very easy to hit headshots with on controller, meaning she gets a significant boost to her overall DPS. Secondly, her shield does have a weak spot in the form of her feet. You can shoot her feet and basically bypass the shield entirely. But with aim assist, it's actually a lot harder to aim that low and consistently hit her. So against other controller players, she is also a little bit better than if you were against a keyboard and mouse player. So this is definitely a controller champion right here, and that's why she's ranking as high as she is. But let me know if you think she should be placed lower or maybe even higher on this list. Sati and Leon are both pretty consistent counters to flanks. Leon has auto aim, Sati has, well, kind of auto-aim, but also cover denial, and also some crowd control, and just a whole lot of stuff going on. But both of them share one thing in common: they're not the greatest DPS against tanks. Now, this is a little bit more so for Leon than Sati, because Sati is overall pretty consistent, but Leon definitely has her weaknesses to big, beefy tanks just coming and diving her. But against squishies, she is an absolute menace. She's just overall a pretty average champion right now, and so she goes in B as well. Victor is also just, I mean... he's the most milquetoast of milquetoast characters. He's not particularly strong, but he's not weak either, and he's very basic. He runs, he guns, he throws a grenade, yeah, he's alright. Now, Octavia and Tiberius are both high B tier here. Octavia is another champion who's really good on controller because of that aim assist. If you get in the Goldilocks zone with Octavia, which is to say mid-range, then you will be doing absolutely insane amounts of damage. Her DPS is actually among the highest when you're in that mid-range. But in close range, she's just very awkward because you either have to scope in and thus have a really hard time hitting her shots, or you have to use your unscoped shots, which don't do a lot of damage, chew through your ammo, and are wildly inaccurate. And then at long range, she does have pretty steep fall-off, so you're not going to be doing much damage at long range. So that's why she's held back and only places in B tier, but especially if you're on controller, if you can get in those mid-range circumstances, she is actually really good. And then Tiberius is just a really solid champion overall. He's got very good damage, very good burst combos. His mobility is a little bit lacking on his regular movement ability, And then his ultimate actually has good mobility, but it's not useful for much else. And so those two abilities are kind of what hold him back, but his burst is very good. He's got good kind of cover denial with his ricocheting shots, which can be good on maps like Ice Mines. And he's generally just really solid. So he goes at the top of B tier for me. Next up, we have the A- tier, which is the tier for characters that are actually really strong, but you also have to be really, really good at them in order to play them to that standard. We only have 3 characters here, and so we'll briefly go over each of them. Eevee is the highest skill flank in the game because she has a very squishy health pool and requires an excellent mastery of game sense, timing, positioning, and of course ability usage and good aim as well, especially if you're trying to hit someone at longer distances because she has a really slow projectile. So a lot of skill goes into playing this character, but if you can play her, she's actually one of the best flanks in the game right now. Very good mobility, very good range, very good damage, and an excellent ultimate. What more can you ask for? Atlas is also really good, but you've got to be extremely careful when you play him, because if you do something bad, you're actually going to be actively sabotaging your team instead of just, well, being bad at the game like you would be with any other champion. If you rewind someone at the wrong time or in the wrong place, you will actively hinder your teammate's ability to pop off, which is something you don't want to do. But a well-placed rewind can mean the difference between winning the game and losing the game, and he also has a really powerful shield in the form of his stasis field, which can be augmented with his big wall talent to cover the entire map. It's basically like a miniature ultimate every team fight, which is really good if you can manage it properly. So another very strong champion, but very skillful. Pip is the last champion here, who is an extremely high skill support that requires an excellent mastery of geometry in order to make work. Not only is hitting his weapon shots complicated because they're a slow arcing projectile, you've also got to manage your potions properly so that they hit the most people possible. You also want to make sure you save your potion for people who are behind walls or people who are just generally out of the reach of your normal weapon shots. So a lot of skill goes into managing his potion and knowing when and where to use it. He also requires very good positioning and also has some very skillful tech, as you'll see expert pit mains pull out by using his own weapon shots in conjunction with Weightless to do some parkour and do some really good stuff. Lastly, he also requires good coordination with his team in order to make his ultimate work, because he often doesn't do enough damage to kill his own chickens these days, so it's important to have allies nearby to finish the job. Overall, these 3 champions have tremendous potential to pop off, but you've also got to be really skillful at them in order to pull it off. So very good, but very skillful. Now we get to move on to the A+ tier, which is for characters that are generally just extremely strong right now. Let's start off with the flanks first, of which there are quite a few, 2 of which I actually placed way lower on my previous tier list, but now that crossplay is in ranked, I've placed much higher. Those 2 champions are Koga and Lex, who are actually insane if you plug in a controller and take advantage of that aim assist. In particular, the aim assist is really good for Lex because it basically negates the fact that he actually has really serious screen shake. That can make it actually pretty hard to aim with him otherwise. He has a really high DPS, wall hacks, aim hacks, and he also has pretty decent mobility to boot. So a very strong champion, and I've also seen some PC players do pretty good with him too, so generally just really strong. Koga is also pretty good for the same reason that all meta controller characters are good, because he has a fast firing hit scan weapon. And so he does pretty good damage and also has a really good mobility and utility in the form of his dashes, which cleanse stuff like Cauterize and make him briefly untargetable. So he can dodge some pretty hefty damage with that and get the job done. Speaking of dodging damage, we have Zin, who is the cockroach of the game. He's just so hard to kill, and so it just makes him really strong no matter which meta you're in. His Billow is really good for making him completely untargetable, and his counter can block a lot of stuff. His damage is also extremely consistent because he has projectiles the size of a truck, so very consistent, well-performing champion. Maeve and Seven are the 2 most mobile champions in A tier, with Maeve being slightly less mobile than Seven, but generally still being really good. Maeve has very good range damage with no fall-off, you've just got to master her projectiles, and she can also reset all of her abilities with her 9 lives to get out of a sticky situation. She's got good cards that give her damage reduction and further healing and movement speed, and is generally a really strong choice right now. Seven also has the absolute best mobility in the game, bar none. He's so fast. He runs laps around literally everybody. And, well, that has to put him in A tier, right? He's also got really good burst and really good range, but of course the one thing he lacks that prevents him from going into S tier is any form of survivability if he actually does take a hit. He's very squishy and has no form of survivability like Eevee's Ice Block or any damage reduction cards, nothing. Well, except that one damage reduction card for when he's latched to a wall, but at that point he's not moving now, is he? So that one doesn't really count. So yeah, all really, really good flanks, so you should definitely take a look at playing right now. Barrack, Torvald, Azan, and Ruckus are our 4 A-tier tanks. Barrack is the second best point tank in the game right now with excellent survivability, protective capabilities, and damage to boot. Torvald is a really good character for just duoing up with somebody and making sure you win. He's great at protecting his flank when they go in, or protecting someone who's being dove in his backline. His Nullify is an excellent tool for locking down a target to kill them, or again, protecting his backline from a devious flanker. And he is also a juggernaut in his own right with a lot of health in the form of his shield and a really good weapon to boot that does 800 damage per second with no self-slow penalty like Ruckus or Rom. Azan is generally a jack of all trades, but a really strong jack of all trades. He's got a really good barrier, some of the best mobility in the tank class, really consistent and powerful damage, and is overall really, really tanky. So Azan is also excellent. And then lastly we have Ruckus, who has the best mobility in the tank class, really good control on his mobility, and also pretty good traversal. He's also got excellent damage, some of the highest damage in the tank class when you combine his miniguns and his missiles together, and his ultimate is just insane. So our last really, really good tank. All of these tanks are excellent, and I definitely recommend playing them. We only have 3 supports in the A tier, and those are Maldamba, Lilith, and Furia. Maldamba is who I would consider to be the 5th best support in Paladins right now. Like Azan, he's a jack of all trades, but a really good jack of all trades. He's got good single target healing when you combine his Gourd and his Mending Spirits on a single target, but if you want to spread them out, he's got good area coverage as well. His Mending Spirits has a really exceptional range. He can hit people from so far away, and his Gourd also provides some good self-healing. He's got a really good movement ability with his Slither that's a quick dash that also cleanses and blocks everything, and he's also got pretty decent damage too. If you're consistently hitting your weapon shots while someone is under the effect of the Gourd, they'll take a decent amount of damage. On top of all that, he's got good crowd control in the form of his stun and his ultimate, and he can provide his teammates with a movement speed buff if he so chooses. So a lot of really good stuff going on. Definitely one of the most fun supports in the game, one of the best designed supports in the game, overall one of the best balanced supports in the game. Yeah, I just love Damba. He's amazing. Lilith is who I would consider to be the 4th best support in the game. She has an absurd amount of healing. She can dump healing into somebody like there's no tomorrow. If you put a Hex on somebody and a full charge Swarm on them, they basically just don't die. On top of that, she's got really good damage. Her Swarm does have a channeled kind of cast animation to it, where you do have to spend some time channeling it, but once it's on the ground, it not only does healing, it also does a pretty good amount of damage. So yeah, she's not lacking on damage like Saris is, where, you know, Saris is channeling an ability, but that ability also doesn't do damage on the side. The only real limiting factor to Lilith is that she's kind of hard to play around for her team sometimes. She's limited by her range both in terms of how you have to cast the Hex, and also how you have to find a swarm and stand inside of it. But when you do stand inside of those swarms, she is a monster, and she's also really hard to kill because she's got pretty decent mobility, and she's the tankiest support out of the bunch with tank levels of HP. So very, very good support. And then of course Furia is the 3rd best support in the game right now. After her Cherish rework, she has just received the most insane burst I think I've ever seen any support have. Every 3 seconds, she can full heal a squishy champion and heal back up half of a tank's HP in an instant. Especially when that tank buys Rejuvenate, we are seeing on average well above 2,000 on each burst, sometimes even coming close to 3,000 on some of the tankiest tanks. She is just a menace when it comes to that healing. On top of that, she's got arguably the best ultimate in the game with Inflame, which gives everyone on the team a damage bonus and a movement speed bonus for 7 seconds, which is really, really powerful. And her damage on her own is pretty good as well. Her weapon is pretty consistent, especially when at max wrath, and her beam can allow her to kill someone incredibly quickly and defend herself really, really well. So very powerful support, definitely deserving of A tier, if not maybe low S tier. Now let's take a look at our DPS lineup, starting with Shaolin. After his buffs, he is much more resilient to tanks diving him because he got a pretty nice health buff as well as a fire rate buff to his bow to make him have more consistent tank pressure. He's also exceptional at dealing with squishy champions. That's really where his niche lies, is dealing with a lot of the powerful flanks that we have in the game right now. He has a really good burst. His sand trap cripple is amazing, but even without sand trap, his cripple is amazing because it actually lasts longer or can silence people with deafening silence. So he's got a lot of options there, and all it basically takes to kill a squishy is one crippling arrow and then a rapid shot follow up and they will die. So really consistent anti-squishy champion, and he's no longer as vulnerable to tanks, which is why I put him higher than Leon. Next up, we have three pretty powerful blasters right now, Drogoz, Dredge, and Betty. These champions are excellent spammers who are really good on a lot of maps like Ice Mines, Jaguar Falls, etc. And Betty in particular is extremely devious. She's such a nasty tank buster. And she's also pretty good against squishies in her own right these days because they've buffed her weapon to infinity, and she has pretty good mobility as well, which she can use in combination with her weapon shots to basically have a slightly better version of Andrew's dash flicks, honestly. So yeah, really good there, but then Dredge is also pretty good, spamming right behind her, and Drogoz, well, his counters aren't really that great these days. Leon and Androxus both are not in A tier, and so Drogoz really has a good time to shine right now. And yeah, he can really do a lot with his kit when he's not constantly being barraged by a bunch of hit scan fire. So really good champion there too. And then we have Cassie and Tyra. Tyra is exceptional right now because of her hunting party, which provides a reveal to her entire team and also a damage buff on a specific enemy to her entire team. So everyone can end up doing 15% more damage to a target, which is absolutely incredible. And then Cassie is just a really solid all-rounder. She's great against squishies, great against tanks, very consistent champion right now. Maybe not as good on controller, but at least for us PC players, very consistent champion. Lastly, let's check out our S tier, which has all of the best champions in the game. Starting off with our flanks, we have the best keyboard and mouse flank and the best controller flank. Talus is absolutely insane on controller. Like I've already said, fast-firing hit scans perform exceptionally well on controller. On top of that, Talus has the unique gimmick of a portal, which he can place down in safety, be as aggressive as he wants, and then when he's in danger, teleport back to that portal. And so he's an extremely safe character to play. He can easily just dive into the enemy team backline, get one or two picks, and then get out back to safety, making him very hard to pin down. His ultimate is also really good because it allows him to directly engage with a target and potentially finish off a low HP target and then combo onto another person as well. So he can do really good stuff and is overall the best flank on controller. And then we have Vatu, who has the second best mobility in the game after 7. His ability to choose his fights is almost unmatched. He can ambush onto any target he pleases and then dash around them or dash away when the going gets rough. He also has an insane burst combo where you throw a set of kunai, then throw shadow bombs, then throw another set of kunai, which will almost always eviscerate a target. His ultimate is also really good. It's basically a guaranteed kill every time unless they have resilience, and he is generally just insane. He also has insane survivability unlike 7 because he has tremendous amounts of damage reduction. He has inherent damage reduction on his dashes, and he also has 2 really good cards that give him damage reduction after using shadow bombs or after ambush, so he almost always has some form of damage reduction, meaning that even though he only has 1900 health, he actually has more through the power of damage reduction. So really good character overall, the best flank on keyboard and mouse at the moment. Next up, we have 2 tanks, Inara and Khan. Inara is the best point tank in the game right now, bar none. Her survivability is just through the roof ever since they buffed Mother's Grace. Mother's Grace now provides her 50% damage reduction, 50% increased healing, and crowd control immunity on Earthen Guard, which... the ability speaks for itself, man. That's busted. On top of that, she can stack it with Rejuvenate further to get 80% increased healing, since Rejuvenate does not have diminishing returns with Mother's Grace. So, yeah, she can just say Cauterize does not affect her at all, just completely mitigate it whatsoever. No more Cauterize, bye-bye. And when she doesn't have her Earthen Guard up, she also has really good survivability with her wall, which deploys a physical barrier between her and the enemies. She can use it not just to protect herself, but also trap others. And if someone decides to die of her, or she's feeling like being aggressive, she can put down her Warder's Field to provide further damage and also slow people. They took away her self-slow last patch, and so she can also walk at people exceptionally easy now, and her damage is not to be trifled with. It's certainly not the best in the tank class, but don't underestimate it. And her ultimate is just, it's a really big AoE stun that lasts for a long time. Pretty solid. Khan also recently got some buffs that gave him the absolute best single target damage in the tank class. His damage is so high with Storm of Bullets now that it's actually kind of absurd. He just feels like a big beefy damage champion at this point. His Commander's Grab is pretty solid as well, allowing him to briefly stun a target, or he can just use it as a dash. Definitely not the best mobility in the tank class, but he makes up for it in other ways, like his Battle Shout, which provides him total damage immunity and also got a buff to his healing output recently, giving it, I believe, 1350 healing per shout, which is just incredible. It's basically turned Khan into an off healer at this point, because he can casually just go up to a squishy champion on his team and almost full heal them, as long as they don't have Cauterize, which is just mind-blowing. And then his shield, it's not that great at protecting other teammates, but it's pretty great at protecting himself. And what he can do is he can hold up his shield long enough for Cauterize to wear off, and then get the full effect of his Battle Shout even in late game. He also has a pretty good card that allows him to get extra healing while his shield is up, which is pretty nice as well. But besides his incredible damage and incredible healing, which allows him to be a real team player and also get a lot of kills, his ultimate is just absurd. It's basically a free kill every time, no questions asked. All you have to do is pick someone up and then hold them in front of your team, and they can just shoot them for absolutely free. The stun lasts for so long that there's almost no hope of an enemy getting out of it, even with Rezil 3. And if they're a champion who doesn't have particularly good mobility, he can just save his team the trouble and throw them off the map, which is almost always a guaranteed kill, as long as you're not throwing somebody like Maeve, Seven, Ying, etc., right? Don't throw those champions, pinata those champions, but if it's someone like Lex or Victor, well, throw them away. And yeah, it's basically a free kill every time. Really, really good ult, and since his healing and his damage both got buffed, it means you can actually spam that ultimate way more than you could last patch, because, well, damage and healing both contribute to ultimate charge, right? So, really good synergy there, and he is, in my opinion, the best off-tank in the game at the moment. Whenever I see him, I'm terrified. He's so good right now. Now we get to talk about the two supports who have been dominating the ranked scene ever since they've gotten buffed. Genos and Grover are both must picks or must bans right now, and they're actually both pretty similar if you get down and think about it. Both of them can heal through walls, requiring basically no line of sight whatsoever. Both of them have insane area healing. They can basically heal their entire team at all times. Both of them have a really good burst and really good consistency. Both of them have a form of crowd control that is pretty powerful, pretty easy, and pretty spammable. And both of them can play extremely safely behind as many walls as they want, almost. So, yeah, they both are very similar and very powerful right now. Genos with Luminary is just mind-boggling. If you haven't seen my recent videos on that, go check them out, because he shouldn't be allowed to heal for this much. I agree that he needed a heal buff, and when I originally saw the heal buff, I didn't think he'd be this powerful, but as it turns out, they really overtuned him, and he is just one of the best heal bots in the game right now. But yeah, he's not without his downsides compared to Grover. Grover basically does some things a little better than Genos, and others a little worse. Grover's mobility is definitely better than Genos's. He has vertical mobility, first of all, which automatically makes him better, but also with Vine Tech, he can just traverse across the map so much better than basically every other champion in the support class, which is really good. And he has really good uptime on it as well, with certain cards, but also just in general, if you buy some Chronos, the Vine is very spammable. Grover also has the best healing ultimate in the game, 2500 healing per second, and he could potentially hit most of his team, if not all of his team with it. It also has excellent uptime because of just how much healing Grover does these days, and also because of the fact that he can spam axes every single second of the match, giving him that extra little bit of damage that makes him a great hybrid support. But, of course, Grover does have a range penalty. He can only heal people as long as they're standing next to him. Whereas with Genos, Genos can put a astral mark on somebody when they're in range, and then they can go across the map. They can be playing 7 and just casually traverse to the enemy team, spawn in 2 seconds, and they will still be getting healed for the next 14 seconds if you're running the duration card. And that also means that they're going to be getting those little burst heals from Luminary too if you heal someone else. It might not seem like a lot, but it really does add up, and it's just such a powerful way to pocket someone in today's meta. And that's where Genos is a little bit better than Grover, right? He doesn't have as much of a problem when it comes to range, because all he needs to do is pop a mark on someone and they are good for the next while. It's truly incredible how long those marks last. So both of these supports, to recap, are just the best. Just period. They have so much utility in the form of not needing to be able to have direct line of sight on someone. They can heal through walls. They both have really good mobility, really good crowd control, and they can do a lot of damage throughout the match too. They're just insane right now, so do not sleep on these two champions. Make sure you're picking or banning these in ranked. And the very last champion to talk about today. I don't even know how long this video is going on for as I'm recording this, but I feel like it's been longer than the last tier list. We have Bomb King. Bomb King is still the best damage champion in the game. Even after his nerf, he did receive a nerf to Shock and Awe recently, which is definitely noticeable. The big deal with that nerf was the duration nerf, taking it down a second. That really made a difference. But he still has absolutely incredible movement speed with that card, and he's really tanky with really, really good damage. Just insane levels of damage, right? He has really good spam in the form of a Royal Subjects, which allows him to basically always confirm damage on a target, even if it's not a direct hit, and he can still hit multiple targets super easily. He can spam behind cover super easily, hitting people behind shields, behind corners, etc. It's just super spammy. And yeah, until they do something about Royal Subjects, he is basically going to stay at the top of the meta, in my opinion. They could also hit him in other ways, like maybe nerfing his health, because he is pretty tanky in that regard, but honestly, Royal Subjects is just absurd with how easy it is to confirm the damage and just do an insane amount of damage and just kill everybody all over the place. Just explosions everywhere. He's terrifying, man. So yeah, BK, still the best damage champion in the game. And yeah, we'll see what they do with him in the future. But anyways, with the last champion out of the way, that's going to be the end of this video. So let me know your thoughts in the comments section down below, and keep in mind that this is just an opinion piece, and I also might have gotten some of the controller champions wrong because, well, I'm still not that great at controller. I'm not super experienced with controller, and I can only speak to what I've seen in the ranked scene from other people playing them. So yeah, if you think my Koga placement or Lex placement, etc. is wrong, please be sure to tell me because, well, I'm still trying to learn that personally. But yeah, if you've enjoyed the video, make sure, of course, to drop a like and subscribe, and also check out my VODs channel. We are so close to reaching 1,000 subscribers, and I would love to reach 1,000 subscribers before June the 4th, so that way I can say I got 1,000 subscribers in a month. That'd be pretty sick, so check that out, and also check out the Twitch channel and the Discord server linked in the description down below. And with all that being said, thank you guys for watching. I will see you all next time. Peace out.